He forgot everything except the maid's face. The white ceiling was the first thing James saw when he opened his eyes. Unfamiliar, sterile. The rhythmic beeping of machines filled the room as a woman with tear-stained cheeks leaned over him, her diamond earrings catching the fluorescent light. "James! Oh my God, you're awake!" Her manicured hands clasped his. The wedding ring on her finger glinted. Apparently he was married to her. "The doctor said you might never... I've been so worried." James. That was his name, they told him. The accident had been catastrophic, a head-on collision on the I-95 that left his Mercedes wrapped around a guardrail and his memories scattered across the asphalt. Traumatic retrograde amnesia, the neurologist explained. Complete erasure of his personal history while maintaining functional skills. He could remember how to read, how to speak, even how to calculate compound interest, but not his wife, Catherine, not his children, Tyler and Madison, not the Boston penthouse he apparently owned or the investment firm he had built from nothing. "It's common for memories to return gradually," Dr. Winters assured them during discharge. "Familiar environments, routines, photographs, these can all serve as triggers, but I must caution you, some patients never fully recover their past." 3 weeks later, James stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, watching Boston's skyline glitter beneath him. This wealth should have impressed him, but it felt like looking at someone else's life through glass. The family photographs on the walls showed a confident man with his arm around Catherine at galas, on yachts, at ski resorts, a stranger wearing his face. "Your coffee, sir." The voice was soft, unassuming. James turned, and there she was, the only familiar thing in this alien world. Dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, eyes that met his briefly before looking down. A small mole just above her right eyebrow. She handed him the cup, careful not to let their fingers touch. "Thank you." He paused, realizing he didn't know her name. "Elena," she said quietly. Elena Morales. The name meant nothing to him, but her face. It was the only thing that had survived the void. When he'd first seen her 3 days after coming home, the jolt of recognition had nearly knocked him over. Not memories exactly, but a feeling, a certainty. "I know you." In a world where he recognized nothing else, not even his own reflection, her face was a lighthouse. "How long have you worked for us, Elena?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Almost 4 years, sir." Her voice carried the slight lilt of someone who had learned English as a second language. Catherine swept into the room, elegant in her designer suit. "James, the Stevensons are expecting us at 7. Your navy Tom Ford is laid out." She barely acknowledged Eleanor. "That will be all for now." Elena nodded and disappeared into the apartment's service areas. James watched her go, a strange ache forming in his chest. That night, among Boston's elite at an upscale restaurant, James performed the role expected of him. He smiled at jokes he didn't understand, referenced business deals he couldn't remember, and pretended to recognize people who claimed decades of friendship. Catherine guided him through it all with a protective hand on his arm and whispered prompts in his ear. "That's Senator Wilson. You donated to his campaign last year. Charlotte's daughter just got into Harvard. We sent flowers. Laugh here. It's about Gerald's golf handicap." By midnight, his head pounded with the effort of being someone he wasn't. On the ride home, Catherine's hand rested on his thigh, her thumb making small circles. "You did wonderfully tonight," she said. "Dr. Winters said maintaining social connections is important for recovery." "I need to know more about who I was," James said, watching the city lights flash by. "Not just business associates and vacation photos. Real things." Catherine's hand stilled. "Of course, darling. Whatever you need." But as they entered the dark penthouse, James couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that beneath the perfect surface of his recovered life, something important remained hidden. And somehow, inexplicably, the key to that mystery lived in the only face he could recognize, the quiet woman who moved through his home like a shadow, watching everything, saying little. The maid who, for reasons he couldn't explain, his damaged brain had refused to forget. Morning light slanted through the bedroom windows as James rifled through his desk drawers. Catherine had left for her weekly tennis match, leaving him alone to search for clues about himself. He found financial statements showing wealth beyond comprehension, legal documents with his signature that meant nothing to him, and a passport filled with stamps from countries he couldn't remember visiting. In the bottom drawer, a small leather-bound journal. Inside, his own handwriting, neat, precise columns of numbers and initials, dates, locations. Nothing revealing, just cryptic notations that frustrated him further. The sound of quiet movement in the hallway caught his attention. Elena passed by with a basket of laundry, pausing when she noticed him. "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't mean to disturb you." "You didn't." James hesitated, then made a decision. "Elena, could I ask you something?" She placed the basket down. "Of course. What was I like before the accident?" Her eyes darted away, then back. "It's not my place to—" "Please," he interrupted. "Everyone treats me like I'm made of glass. My wife tells me about achievements and social obligations, but nothing about who I really was. You've been in this house for years. You must have observed things." Elena's fingers twisted together. "You were very focused, sir. Determined. You worked long hours. Was I kind?" The question surprised even him. A slight hesitation. "You were fair." "Not the same thing," James noted. "And my relationship with Catherine?" Elena's posture stiffened. "Mrs. Sullivan manages the household beautifully." "You seemed appreciative." The careful word choice told him everything. A marriage of convenience, perhaps. A business arrangement disguised as love. "And the children?" "They're away at boarding school, Catherine says." "Yes, sir. Exeter Academy. They visit during holidays." Her voice softened slightly. "Madison takes after you. Very smart with numbers. Tyler is more artistic." James nodded, absorbing this. "Thank you for being honest." Something flickered in her eyes. Guilt. "I should continue with my duties." As she turned to leave, James noticed a small scar on the back of her hand. Without thinking, he reached out and touched it. "How did you get this?" Elena froze. For a moment, something electric passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. Fear. Definitely. "Kitchen accident," she said quickly, withdrawing her hand. "Years ago." But James knew it was a lie. And more disturbingly, he knew it was a lie. As if somewhere in his shattered memory, he held the truth about that scar. That afternoon, James ventured out alone, dismissing the driver Catherine had arranged. He walked Boston streets, hoping something might trigger a memory. Financial district buildings towered around him, including his own company's headquarters. Sullivan Investments, 43 floors of glass and steel. On impulse, he entered the building. The security guard recognized him immediately. "Mr. Sullivan! Welcome back, sir. We've all been praying for your recovery." The executive elevator whisked him to the top floor, where a startled assistant jumped to her feet. "Mr. Sullivan, we weren't expecting you today. Just thought I'd stop by," he said casually, as if he remembered who she was. "Of course, Mr. Patterson has been handling everything in your absence, but I'm sure he'd be thrilled to see you." Patterson. The name triggered nothing. "I'll just look around my office first, if that's all right." His corner office offered commanding views of Boston Harbor. Awards lined the walls, photos of handshakes with politicians and celebrities. On his desk, a silver frame held a family portrait, himself, Catherine, and 2 teenagers with his eyes, but expressions he couldn't read. A knock on the door preceded a balding man with anxious eyes. "James, what a wonderful surprise." "Patterson," James acknowledged, pretending familiarity. "How are you feeling? Catherine's kept us updated, of course, but it's tremendous to see you in person." Patterson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I've maintained all our major accounts in your absence. The Carlton merger is proceeding as planned." James nodded, studying the man. "Partner? Friend? Rival?" He couldn't tell. "I appreciate that. I'm just getting reacquainted with things." Patterson's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at James with a strained smile. "Catherine's on her way. She's quite concerned about you being out alone." Of course she was. James felt a flicker of resentment at being managed so carefully. I'm not an invalid, just incomplete. Completely understandable. The doctors say patience is key. Patterson gestured to the bookshelves. Everything's exactly as you left it. Your personal files, client information, all secure. James ran his fingers along the spines of leather binders. And our business relationship? We're partners? A slight pause. You brought me in 10 years ago. Best decision of my life. But something in Patterson's tone made James wonder if it had been the best decision of his. By the time Catherine arrived, flushed and visibly upset, James had learned nothing concrete. Only that the life he was supposed to reclaim felt increasingly like a beautifully constructed prison. You scared me, Catherine said later as their driver took them home. The doctor said you shouldn't strain yourself. I need to understand who I was, Catherine, who I am. She squeezed his hand. You will, but rushing won't help. As they entered the penthouse, Eleanor was polishing the silver in the dining room. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, James felt again that inexplicable connection, as if she alone held the key to unlock his past. And perhaps, more disturbingly, the reason his mind had chosen to forget it. James woke, gasping from a dream he couldn't recall, fragments slipping away like water through fingers, something about falling, something about betrayal. Eleanor's face looking down at him with concern. The space beside him was empty. Catherine often rose early for charity committee meetings or spa appointments. He checked the clock, 6:38 a.m. Downstairs, the apartment was silent, except for soft sounds from the kitchen. He followed them to find Elena preparing breakfast, her movements efficient and practiced. "Good morning," he said. She startled slightly. "Mr. Sullivan, you're up early. Bad dreams." He sat at the kitchen island, a space he suspected the previous James Sullivan rarely occupied. "Do I take coffee?" A small smile touched her lips. "Black, no sugar." "Then I'll have that." She poured him a cup, then returned to slicing fruit. James watched her hands. Skilled, steady, working hands. Not like Catherine's manicured fingers that never seemed to do anything more strenuous than lift a champagne flute. "Were you working here the day of my accident?" he asked suddenly. Elena's knife paused mid-slice. "Yes. Did I seem different that day? Upset about anything?" She placed the knife down carefully. "You argued with Mrs. Sullivan that morning, and you had a meeting you were concerned about." "What kind of meeting?" "I don't know. But you made a phone call in your study. You seemed angry afterward." James absorbed this. "Thank you for telling me." "I shouldn't have," she admitted quietly. "Mrs. Sullivan doesn't like the staff discussing family matters. I'm not asking as your employer. I'm asking as someone trying to piece together his life." He hesitated. "Elena, why do you think I remember your face when I've forgotten everyone else?" Their eyes met across the counter, and for a moment something unspoken passed between them. "Perhaps I was just present," she offered, "in the background of your daily life." But they both knew it was more than that. The sound of the front door opening interrupted them. Catherine's voice called out, "James!" Eleanor immediately returned to her task, head down, the moment broken. Later that day, James accessed his personal laptop. Catherine had provided the password reluctantly, warning that work stress might delay his recovery. But he needed answers. He searched his email, finding thousands of messages about business deals, charity events, and correspondence with the children's schools. Nothing illuminating until he found a folder labeled simply M. Inside, dozens of emails to someone identified only by the initial, dating back 3 years. The tone was cautious, formal at first, then increasingly familiar. Discussions about books, philosophy, politics, real conversations, not the superficial social niceties that seemed to dominate his current life. The most recent email was dated 2 days before his accident. "Meeting confirmed for Friday, 2 p.m., same place. We need to finalize everything before it's too late. Destroy this after reading. J." James stared at the screen, heart racing. What had he been planning? And who was M? His search was interrupted by a notification, a calendar reminder for a doctor's appointment. Catherine had arranged weekly sessions with Dr. Winters to monitor his recovery. In the neurologist's office, surrounded by brain scans and medical degrees, James carefully broached the subject. "Is it possible I was trying to forget?" Dr. Winters looked up from his notes. "What do you mean?" "My amnesia. Could it be psychologically motivated rather than just physical trauma?" The doctor considered this. The brain is extraordinarily complex. In cases of severe trauma, there are documented instances where amnesia seems selective, particularly around traumatic events, the mind protecting itself, essentially. "So, I could have wanted to forget. It's not exactly a conscious choice," Dr. Winters clarified. "But if there was significant psychological stress accompanying the physical trauma, then yes, it's possible your amnesia has components of both organic damage and psychological protection." On the ride home, James stared out at Boston's familiar yet foreign streets, contemplating the doctor's words. Was his mind protecting him from something? Was that why he clung to Elena's face, the one person who might have been connected to whatever he was trying to escape? That evening, a dinner party at the penthouse. Catherine's friends, couples with sharp smiles and sharper tongues, discussing people and events James should know, but didn't. He played his part, smiling emptily, nodding at appropriate moments, all while watching Eleanor move silently around them, serving drinks, clearing plates. During dessert, an older man, Harrison, some kind of legal counsel, pulled James aside. "Glad to see you recovering, James. Catherine's been quite concerned." "So I gather." Harrison lowered his voice. "About that matter we discussed before your accident. I assume it's on hold." James maintained a neutral expression. "Refresh my memory." Harrison's eyes narrowed slightly. "The trust amendments. Catherine mentioned your memory issues, but I thought perhaps—" He shook his head. "Never mind. We can discuss it when you're fully recovered." Across the room, Catherine was watching them, her smile fixed, but her eyes alert. When their guests finally departed, she kicked off her heels with a sigh. "You did wonderfully tonight. Everyone was so impressed with your progress." Harrison mentioned trust amendments. Catherine's smile faltered slightly. "Just routine updates to our estate planning. Nothing for you to worry about now. I'd like to see the documents." "James," she said, her tone softening to something that might have been concern or might have been calculation. "The doctors said stress could impede your recovery. Let me handle the business and legal matters for now." From the dining room came the quiet sounds of Elena clearing the last of the dinner plates. Catherine glanced that way, then back at James. "You watch her," she said quietly, "all the time." "Do I? Is there something you remember about her? Something you're not telling me?" The question hung between them like a challenge. In that moment, James realized Catherine was as afraid of what he might remember as he was desperate to recall it. "No," he lied. "Nothing specific." That night, unable to sleep beside his wife, James stood at his bedroom window. In the guest parking area below, he saw Elena leaving for the night, her small figure moving toward the bus stop. On impulse, he grabbed his coat. 5 minutes later, he caught up with her just as her bus arrived. "Elena." She turned, surprise and something else, fear, crossing her face. "Mr. Sullivan, is something wrong?" "Who is M?" he asked without preamble. Her expression changed to one of alarm. She glanced at the waiting bus, then back at him. "Please," he said, "I need to know what I was planning before the accident." Eleanor's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Not here." She pressed something into his hand, a folded note, then boarded the bus without looking back. Under a streetlight, James unfolded the paper, an address in Dorchester, and 4 words that sent a chill through him. "They're watching us both." The following morning, James told Catherine he needed air, a walk to clear his head. She suggested the driver accompany him, but he insisted on going alone. "Dr. Winters recommended independence for rebuilding confidence," he said, deploying her own medical concerns against her. The address Elena had given him led to a modest coffee shop in a working-class neighborhood far from his Beacon Hill life. Inside, the warm aroma of coffee and baked goods filled the air. A bell jingled as he entered, and several patrons glanced up briefly before returning to their conversations. Elena sat in a corner booth, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of her uniform. Without the context of his penthouse, she looked different, more substantial somehow, less a shadow and more a person. He slid into the seat across from her. "Thank you for meeting me." "I shouldn't be doing this," she said quietly. "If Mrs. Sullivan found out—" "Found out what exactly? What am I missing, Elena?" She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "You really don't remember anything? Just your face, nothing else." She nodded slowly, as if making a decision. "My full name is Elena Morales. I have a master's degree in financial analysis from UMass Boston. I'm not just a maid, Mr. Sullivan." "Then why—" 3 years ago, I discovered irregularities in the pension fund where I worked. Significant money being diverted through a complex scheme of shell companies. When I traced the connections, they led to Sullivan Investments." Her eyes met his directly. "To you?" James felt the blood drain from his face. "I was embezzling pension funds?" "That's what I thought at first. I gathered evidence, planned to report it to the SEC. But before I could, you approached me. I knew what you were doing. You had security monitoring potential whistleblowers, but instead of silencing me, you revealed something I never expected. You weren't behind the scheme. Your partner was." "Patterson," James said, the name suddenly heavy with meaning. Elena nodded. "Working with Catherine. They'd been manipulating accounts for years, using your company's reputation as cover. You discovered it just months before I did. Why didn't I go to the authorities? The evidence implicated you too deeply. Patterson had forged your signatures, used your personal accounts as pass-throughs. It was your word against carefully constructed paper trails." She leaned forward. "You needed irrefutable proof that would clear your name while exposing them. So I hired you to help gather evidence," James said, the pieces finally connecting. "As household staff, you'd be invisible to them." "Yes, for 3 years we've been documenting everything, building a case. The private accounts, the offshore transfers. 2 weeks before your accident, we finally had enough. The meeting I scheduled for the day after the crash was with the FBI," she confirmed. "We were going to turn everything over." James sat back, overwhelmed. "They knew, didn't they? Catherine and Patterson realized we were about to expose them." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "The accident report said a truck driver fell asleep at the wheel, but the driver disappeared before giving a formal statement. The traffic cameras for that section of highway were malfunctioning that day. They tried to kill me," James said, the reality sinking in. "And when I survived, they found a silver lining in your amnesia. As long as you don't remember, the evidence stays hidden, and they remain in control of everything, your company, your fortune. The trust amendments Harrison mentioned." Eleanor nodded grimly. "Catherine's been trying to gain complete control of your assets while you're incapacitated." James ran a hand over his face. "Where's the evidence now?" "Safe. You created a secure location only you and I knew about." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small key. "This opens a storage locker at South Station. Everything is there, documents, recordings, account numbers." Their fingers touched as she handed him the key, and in that moment, another realization struck him. We weren't just partners in this investigation, were we? Elena's eyes met his, vulnerable and honest for the first time. "No," she said softly, "we weren't. That's why I remembered your face. Out of everything else, my mind held on to you." She smiled sadly. "The heart remembers what the mind forgets." James took her hand, feeling the small scar he somehow knew had come from a childhood accident in her grandmother's kitchen in Guadalajara. A detail he shouldn't know, but somehow did. "What do we do now?" "We finish what we started," she said with quiet determination. "We take the evidence to the FBI today, before Catherine realizes what's happening." As they stood to leave, James felt something breaking through the fog in his mind. Not complete memories, but certainties. The man he had been, the choices he had made, the courage it took to stand against his own wife and business partner to do what was right. And most clearly of all, the reason his damaged mind had clung to Elena's face when it let go of everything else. Some connections ran deeper than memory, anchored not in the fragile tissue of the brain, but in something more fundamental. Outside, Boston's winter sunlight cast long shadows across the street. James looked at the woman beside him, not the quiet shadow who moved through his home, but his partner, his confidant, perhaps even his future. "Ready?" she asked. He nodded, feeling more like himself than he had since waking in that hospital bed. Ready. The memories might never fully return. The man he had been might remain partly a stranger. But with Elena beside him and the truth finally in his grasp, James Sullivan could begin again, not reclaiming his old life, but building something new from the pieces that truly mattered. As they walked toward South Station and whatever awaited them there, one thing became perfectly clear. He might have forgotten everything else, but remembering her face had been enough. It had been everything.